Africa, a land of vibrant cultures and immense possibility. Yet, despite its resources, it remains shackled by a paradox. The narrative of poverty and conflict overshadows its true story. Africa is brimming with potential, yet grappling with deep-seated challenges. Independence brought hope and charismatic leaders, but the promises of economic liberation and stability proved elusive. External and internal factors shaped Africa's trajectory. The weight of broken promises hangs heavy over Africa. It's time to forge a new path with integrity and accountability. Africa's struggles stem from a crisis of leadership. Talented individuals are often marginalized. Corruption and impunity erode public trust. This crisis robs citizens of dignity and hope. It's time for good governance and accountability. Independence ignited optimism, but nation-building was tumultuous. Leaders succumbed to power, betraying their people. Corruption and authoritarianism eroded democracy. Disillusionment grew as promises rang hollow. Cynicism and mistrust took root. Power corrupted well-intentioned leaders. Authoritarian regimes silenced dissent and muzzled media. Corruption drained resources, hindering growth. Nepotism and impunity flourished. The legacy of unchecked power casts a long shadow. Africa's story is nuanced, not just about corruption. Resilience and innovation define the continent. Youth are driving change and demanding accountability. The narrative is evolving, celebrating hope and progress. Africa's story deserves to be told in its entirety. Corruption devastates society, eroding governance. Infrastructure crumbles, healthcare and education suffer. Corruption creates instability and deters investment. The most vulnerable bear the brunt. It breeds cynicism and undermines the rule of law. Corruption impacts Africa's youth profoundly. Education is compromised, dreams deferred, overcrowded classrooms and demoralized teachers. Healthcare and basic services are lacking. The system prioritizes personal gain over citizens' well-being. Corruption erodes trust, the bedrock of legitimacy. Citizens become skeptical and disengaged. It undermines social cohesion and fuels division. Rebuilding trust requires transparency and accountability. Citizens must reclaim their voices and demand change. Corruption and poor governance often trigger an exodus of talent. Africa's brightest minds seek fortunes elsewhere due to limited opportunities and a stifling environment. Healthcare professionals emigrate for better resources and salaries. Engineers, scientists and entrepreneurs are lured by better opportunities. This migration creates a void in crucial sectors, hindering development. Stemming brain drain is about harnessing Africa's potential for its people. Corruption and poor governance create a vicious cycle of despair, trapping nations in poverty and hopelessness. Breaking this cycle demands dismantling corruption, rebuilding trust and creating a just society. It begins with a lack of transparency and accountability. Corruption diverts resources from essential services to a select few. This lack of services entrenches poverty and inequality. It erodes trust in institutions and fuels social unrest. A multi-pronged approach is needed to address corruption's root causes. A shift towards a just, equitable and prosperous future is essential. At the heart of leadership failures in Africa lies the allure of absolute power. The desire for more power can become an insatiable hunger, driving leaders to consolidate control at any cost. It becomes less about serving the people and more about self-preservation. The allure of power can warp noble intentions, twisting them into justifications for oppressive actions. Those who once fought for liberation can become the architects of oppression, silencing dissent and manipulating institutions. Leaders surround themselves with loyalists, creating a barrier to change and insulating themselves from criticism. Opposition is suppressed, media silenced, and civil society harassed, stifling democracy and creating fear. The preservation of this corrupt system hinges on maintaining the status quo, a delicate balancing act that requires a combination of cunning manipulation, brute force, and the strategic distribution of patronage. Those in power become masters of exploiting existing divisions within society, whether ethnic, religious, or socio-economic, turning communities against each other to deflect attention from their own failings and maintain their grip on power. Divide and rule becomes the name of the game. Leaders strategically stoke tensions between different groups, exploiting historical grievances and fanning the flames of prejudice to create a climate of fear and distrust. This strategy serves a dual purpose. It weakens any potential for a united opposition and allows those in power to present themselves as the only ones capable of maintaining order and stability. The patronage network, carefully cultivated over years of corrupt rule, acts as a web of loyalty, ensuring that key individuals in positions of influence, from government officials to business leaders to community elders, remain beholden to the ruling elite. Jobs, contracts, and other lucrative opportunities are strategically distributed, not based on merit or fairness, but on loyalty and allegiance to the regime. This creates a system where challenging the status quo carries significant personal risk. Those who dare to speak out against corruption or advocate for change often face intimidation, harassment, or even violence. The message is clear: toe the line or face the consequences. This climate of fear and repression effectively silences dissent, leaving those in power free to continue their exploitative practices with impunity. In many African nations, vast reserves of natural resources, from oil and diamonds to precious metals and fertile land, represent both a blessing and a curse. While these resources have the potential to fuel economic growth and development, they often become the spoils of a corrupt system, tightly controlled by those in power and used to enrich themselves and their cronies at the expense of the nation. This iron grip on resources fuels a vicious cycle of corruption and inequality. Leaders, often in cahoots with multinational corporations, exploit these resources with little regard for environmental sustainability or the long-term well-being of their citizens. Profits from these ventures are siphoned off into offshore accounts, leaving ordinary citizens with little to show for their nation's wealth. This resource curse, as it is often called, has far-reaching consequences. It fuels conflict as different groups, often manipulated by those in power, vie for control of these valuable assets. It undermines democracy by concentrating wealth and power in the hands of a select few, making it nearly impossible to challenge their authority through legitimate means. The lack of transparency and accountability in the management of these resources perpetuates a culture of impunity, where those in power feel emboldened to act with impunity, knowing that they are unlikely to face any real consequences for their actions. This disregard for the rule of law further erodes public trust, creating a climate of cynicism and despair, and hindering any hope for meaningful and sustainable development. In a system where power is consolidated through corruption and maintained through fear, raising one's voice against the status quo can carry a high personal cost. Those who dare to challenge the authority of corrupt leaders, whether they are journalists exposing wrongdoing, activists advocating for change, or ordinary citizens demanding accountability, often find themselves facing a dangerous and uphill battle. The tactics used to silence dissent are as varied as they are insidious. Harassment, intimidation, and arbitrary arrest are common tools of repression. Laws are often twisted or selectively enforced to target critics and stifle opposition. Independent media outlets face censorship, closure, or even violence, while journalists who refuse to be silenced risk their lives to expose the truth. The message is clear: step out of line and face the consequences. This climate of fear and repression has a chilling effect on free speech and assembly, discouraging citizens from speaking out against injustice or demanding better from their leaders. It creates a culture of self-censorship where people are afraid to voice their opinions openly, fearing retribution from those in power. The high cost of dissent not only silences those who dare to challenge the status quo, but also discourages others from following in their footsteps. It creates a sense of hopelessness and apathy, leading many to believe that change is impossible and that challenging the system is futile. This resignation, this acceptance of corruption and injustice as an inevitable part of life, is perhaps the most insidious victory for those who benefit from the status quo. Across the African continent, a new wind is blowing, carrying the energy and determination of a generation unwilling to accept the broken promises of the past. Armed with education and technology, young Africans are rising to challenge the status quo and demand accountability. They refuse to sit idly by as corruption flourishes and opportunities slip away. Understanding that the future rests on their shoulders, they are organizing and demanding to be heard. No longer passive observers, they are becoming active agents of change. One of the defining characteristics of this new generation of African changemakers is their adeptness at harnessing the power of technology to amplify their voices, organize their efforts, and hold those in power accountable. Social media platforms, once primarily tools for connecting with friends and family, have become powerful platforms for mobilization, advocacy, and citizen journalism. Hashtags like #EndSARS in Nigeria, #Fees Must Fall in South Africa, and #Zimbabwean Lives Matter have galvanized young people across the continent and beyond, bringing global attention to issues of police brutality, inequality, and human rights abuses. These online movements have spilled onto the streets, sparking protests, demonstrations, and calls for systemic change. Technology has also become an essential tool for circumventing traditional media outlets, often controlled or influenced by those in power. Citizen journalists, armed with smartphones and a commitment to truth-telling, are filling the void left by a muzzled press, documenting human rights abuses, exposing corruption, and providing alternative narratives to the official government line. Beyond activism, technology is also empowering young Africans to create their own opportunities and drive economic progress. Tech hubs are springing up across the continent, fostering innovation, nurturing entrepreneurship, and providing a space for young people to develop solutions to local challenges. From mobile banking platforms that increase financial inclusion to agricultural technologies that boost productivity, young African innovators are using technology to rewrite the narrative of what is possible. The activism and energy of Africa's youth movements are not limited to street protests and online campaigns. Increasingly, young people are recognizing the need to translate their activism into concrete policy changes, engaging with political systems, and demanding a seat at the table where decisions are made. They are running for office in greater numbers, challenging the dominance of older, often out-of-touch politicians. They are forming political parties and movements that reflect their values and priorities, advocating for policies that address issues such as climate change, unemployment, access to quality education and healthcare, and good governance. They are also demanding greater transparency and accountability from their governments, using technology to track public spending, monitor elections, and expose corruption. They are engaging with international organizations and partners, advocating for policies that promote sustainable development, human rights, and good governance. This shift from protest to policy is crucial for achieving lasting change. While street demonstrations and online campaigns can raise awareness and pressure leaders to act, true transformation requires systemic change, enshrined in law and implemented through effective institutions. Young Africans understand this and are increasingly working within existing structures, while simultaneously pushing for reforms that make those structures more inclusive, transparent and accountable. The rise of Africa's youth is not just about demanding change, it is about offering a new narrative, a new vision for the continent. It is a narrative that rejects the tired tropes of poverty, conflict and despair that have for too long dominated the global perception of Africa. It is a narrative that embraces the continent's diversity, its dynamism, its creativity and its immense potential. It is a narrative that celebrates the resilience of its people, their entrepreneurial spirit, their unwavering optimism, and their deep-seated belief in a better future. This new generation understands that the future of Africa will not be built on handouts or external interventions, but on the ingenuity, hard work, and determination of its own people. They are done waiting for others to solve their problems. They are taking ownership of their destinies, forging their own paths towards progress, and demanding a seat at the global table. Their message is clear. The time for broken promises is over. The time for a new era of leadership driven by integrity, accountability, and a genuine commitment to the well-being of all citizens is now. The world is watching, and Africa's youth are ready to lead the way. Beyond the ballot box, active citizenship in action. The yearning for better leadership in Africa is a shared desire for governance that prioritizes the well-being of its people. True change requires the active participation of every citizen. It's about moving beyond the ballot box to embrace a more participatory role. Active citizenship demands courage, commitment, and challenging the status quo. The power to shape a nation's destiny lies with its people. A collective responsibility, shaping the future together. Transforming leadership in Africa requires collective action. Every citizen holds the power to shape a brighter future. Shared responsibility links the well-being of all. Engage in introspection to challenge ingrained behaviors. The road ahead will be challenging. Desire for a better future can overcome obstacles. The future rests on collective actions for a just, equitable, and prosperous Africa. The unfinished symphony. The story of Africa, much like an intricate and powerful symphony, is a tapestry woven from threads of immense beauty, profound struggle, unwavering resilience, and boundless potential. It is a symphony that has captivated the world with its vibrant rhythms, its soulful melodies, and its moments of breathtaking brilliance. Yet, it is a symphony that remains unfinished, its most stirring movements yet to be played. For too long, the narrative of Africa has been dominated by discordant notes, the cacophony of conflict, poverty, and despair drowning out the symphony's underlying harmony. For too long, the world has focused on the broken instruments, the missed cues, the conductors who have lost their way, overlooking the orchestra of talented musicians eager to share their gifts with the world. But even in the midst of challenges, even when the music faltered, the spirit of Africa endured. Through the darkest of nights, a flicker of hope remained, a belief that a brighter dawn was possible. And now a new movement is building, a crescendo of voices rising to demand more, to claim their rightful place on the world stage, and to finish the symphony on their own terms. This is the Africa that is often unseen and unheard, the Africa that defies the simplistic narratives, the Africa that pulsates with life, creativity, and an unwavering determination to forge a brighter future. It is the Africa of entrepreneurs building innovative businesses, of artists pushing creative boundaries, of activists demanding justice and equality, of everyday citizens working tirelessly to uplift their communities. A call to action, seizing the African moment. This is Africa's moment, a moment pregnant with possibility. The continent stands on the cusp of transformation, but this moment demands action, a collective effort. It is a call to every African, both at home and abroad, to rise to the challenge, to embrace their role as architects of their own destiny. To the youth of Africa, this is your time to seize the reins of leadership. Harness your energy and technological prowess to drive change. To those in power, embrace accountability and govern with integrity. Prioritize the needs of the people above personal gain. And to the global community, this is a time for solidarity and partnership. Support Africa's journey towards self-reliance and sustainable development. The symphony of Africa is still being written. The time to act is now. Let the music begin.